Black Myth Wukong is just packed with hidden items, special mechanics, and even secret bosses, including some in the starting region that you don't want to miss out on. For example, once you talk with the Wise Master, who you'll find within the first hour or two, he'll enchant your gourd. You probably already saw that this lets you collect the spirits left behind after defeating a boss, which each give you a special ability, basically letting you transform into that boss briefly and use one of their attacks. But the enchantment also gives you another benefit. When you collect wandering spirits, so one of the green floating ones you find tucked away in corners and side paths, it will give you a healing charge back in your gourd. So if you could use a bit of healing and your gourd is already full, it's smart to drink from the gourd before collecting the spirits. You might also want to think about saving those spirits to collect after you've cleared out enemies in the surrounding area, so you can use the spirit to gain a bit of healing back without resting at a shrine. Eventually, you'll also come across some regular enemies that are glowing blue, and these guys also give you a special spirit ability. Plus, absorbing the spirit will fully recharge your gourd. That's true for bosses as well. And by the way, if you took down a boss early on, like the Wandering Wight, you might have been a bit confused about why you couldn't collect the spirit. But don't worry, spirits for any bosses defeated before getting the enchantment will be saved for you under the Cultivate Spirits tab at the shrines. These spirit abilities can be pretty strong, so it's definitely worth seeking out bosses to collect them, and some bosses are missable. You can go back to them later, but you might want those abilities before moving forward. And keep in mind, the spirit abilities have a passive bonus as well. For example, the Wandering Wight gives you plus 20 defense. So you definitely want to do a lot of exploring and also check the shop inventories often. For example, I was surprised to find when I went back to the first region after moving on that there was this back scratcher curio for sale in the shop. The game doesn't really tell you this, but after you complete a region, new items will become available in the shop in that region, and you need to go back to find them. This back scratcher curio gives a really nice boost to your max stamina, so it's definitely worth checking those out. Something else the game doesn't really tell you about explicitly are relics, which you get after defeating a regional boss. These relics give some options for nice special abilities, but you need to go into the menu and choose which one you want to activate it. So you want to check for that after completing each region. You also definitely want to be searching around every arena after a boss fight. There's pretty much always at least one special item around the arenas or a special object to interact with that will unlock something later on. You've probably already found items like the Celestial Medicine Pills, which increase your max health, mana, or stamina, but there are much more complex secrets too. Like if you ring all 3 giant bells found near bosses on Blackwind Mountain, it will unlock a special shrine you can travel to for a secret boss fight. Secret bosses at these shrines give special vessel items with unique abilities as well as some other rewards. Back out exploring though, you want to keep an eye out for chests that are disguised to look like environmental objects, like these chests that look like logs. Now, if you have the deluxe edition, you'll also get a special curio called the Wind Chime after reaching the second shrine in the game. The game doesn't tell you about this, but the Wind Chime gives a nice little boost to movement speed, and you won't have any other curios to equip at this time anyway, so it's definitely worth using. Not always being clearly told you've obtained new items or that there are new items available in the shop is definitely a pattern in this game. So you always want to be checking things like curios every so often to make sure you're not missing out on something good. Another example is it's not totally clear that you can craft the Pilgrim's Armor once you reach the Guanyin Temple Shrine right before heading into a boss fight. There are a lot of armors like this that will just show up as craftable at shrines as you progress, and they just get better and better as you go, so always check to see if there's new armor available to craft. You might have also noticed these numbers next to some of the perks on gear items. These indicate how many pieces of that armor set you need equipped in order for the effect to be activated. Generally, you want to make sure you have enough pieces from a set equipped to have at least one of those abilities active, so you don't want to mix and match armor too much. But there is certainly potential to create some builds that mix a few different set pieces. Now, I also want to show you some hidden, useful combat tricks and the best skills to grab early on. But first, let's check out a few settings you might want to adjust. First off, there are auto targeting and auto lock-on settings, which are both off by default. Auto lock-on is something you're probably familiar with from other games. It just means your camera is automatically going to rotate to keep an enemy in view so you can track them more easily and don't have to do it manually. But auto targeting is a little different. Turning this on will make your attacks automatically land on the enemy when you're close enough for them to do so. By default, it's off, and you actually need to direct your attack a bit with the movement stick towards the enemy to make sure it lands. Personally, I like leaving this off, but if you feel like your attacks just aren't landing a lot of the time, try toggling it on. There's also this setting for descriptive information, which is actually really nice because it lets you view the the descriptions for items like potions without going into the menu. You just hold the button down longer and they pop right up. If you're using a controller, you can also toggle input type between A or B. It's on A by default, but for me, B is more like what I'm used to in other games. You can also swap jump and dodge if you want to. And on PC, you'll have an additional setting for controller type, which just forces the game to display either Xbox or PlayStation glyphs if you're seeing the wrong ones. I'll also point out the headgear setting. This lets you turn a piece of headgear invisible if you don't like the look, but you'll still have it equipped so you're not sacrificing any benefits. But let's talk about skills. I think the most important thing to realize is that the stances category has a lot of important ones to grab early on. In addition to the stance-specific skills, there's also the focused attack series all the way on the left side here. These unlock based on how many points you invest in the rest of the skills on this page, and they give you additional focus charges, which is super important since focus is a really key part of the combat system. We'll talk more about focus in a second, but I would highly recommend investing most of your early skill points into skills on this page. Putting a few sparks in the top row skills of each of the trees in the foundation category is also a good idea, but you're going to want the bulk of your first 20 to 30 sparks in the stances category. And specifically, I think it's best to focus on the ones under the default smash stance, as well as a few of these extra skills on the left side. I know it's tempting to start using pillar and thrust as soon as you can unlock them, and you should totally try them out. That's the beauty of being able to respec your skills, which you can do by going into the reignite sparks option at a shrine. You can reset all of them, just one category, or individual sparks. But here's the thing with stances, they become so much more effective once you invest sparks into their trees. So I think it's best to focus on one stance first instead of spreading points across all of them. Smash can deal a lot of damage quickly, and it's really easy and fast to charge up if you unlock Force Unbound and invest some points into Quick Hand. So I would definitely recommend focusing on Smash first. In that Smash tree, you're going to find Resolute Counterflow, Winding Wind, and Skyfall Strike, all of which I would grab early and try to get used to using their associated combos as soon as you can. They're a really good way to deal damage, and you're much safer than you think while using them. To pull off Resolute Strike, you need to have at least one focus charge built up, which is this glowing dot in the bottom right gauge. Then land at least one light attack, and then immediately hit the heavy attack button. But if you have more than one focus charge built up, then you can hit heavy attack again to do the Skyfall Strike. I'll get into more detail on those combos and a bunch of other combat tips in a dedicated video, but let me show you some simpler combat tips first. My favorite, and the one I use all the time, is the jump attack. While holding the movement input towards an enemy, just jump and hit the light attack button. You'll jump off them, dealing some damage and gaining a fair amount of focus buildup. The best thing about this though is that it's fast and pops you back out to a pretty safe distance. You can also just keep repeating it as long as you stay close enough and have the stamina to do it. I find this move really useful to fall back on when an enemy isn't giving me a clear window to attack with a normal light attack combo. You can also enhance this jump attack by hitting the heavy attack button immediately after the light attack button while you're still in the air. This deals more damage, and it's one of the rare instances where using the heavy attack without a focus charge built up is actually useful. Now, the full regular light attack combo is 5 moves long, with the strongest hit coming from the 5th and final move. Notice how each of the first 4 moves has the staff swinging backwards towards the screen and you at the end. That's the best signal I've found to use to pace my button presses and avoid button mashing. It's a good idea to practice this outside of combat and just do one move at a time to get a feel for when they end. It's right before the end that you want to hit the button for the next one. But keep in mind, attacks use stamina, and you won't be able to pull off that powerful 5th move if you don't have any stamina. So you don't want to totally just spam light attacks. You do want to use light attacks a lot though, because it's your main way to build up the focus meter down here in the bottom right, which will transfer over to the charge dots when it gets full. However, you may have noticed that enemies and especially bosses will often retaliate in the middle of your light attack combo. Typically, they do this around the 3rd or 4th move. So you want to try to avoid button mashing the light attack and instead do 3 or 4 very intentional presses unless you know for sure you're going to be able to land that final 5th move. Doing 3 or 4 will give you the best balance of getting a bit of damage in, building up focus to gain charges, and avoiding getting hit. Now, of course, you want those charges to fuel stronger heavy attacks. You should really think of the heavy attack as your focus attack button, not a regular heavy attack. It's really not very effective to tap it when you don't have any focus charges. Now, you can hold it to charge up focus anytime you want, But then you have to unleash the attack immediately, and if you dodge or get hit, you'll lose all the charges, including any that you built up from landing hits. So it's generally better to gain focus from dealing damage because it's sticky, as opposed to the hold to charge focus that has to be used right away. But you still need to be careful when you hit that heavy attack button because enemies will often run away and you'll miss, which wastes all the focus you built up. It's also important to realize that your dodges operate in a chain of 3, with a short delay after the third. So you want to think about dodging in sets of 3. However, if your stamina is depleted, you'll only get the first dodge animation in that 3 dodge combo, which covers the least amount of ground. So another reason to keep an eye on that stamina. Of course, you also have perfect dodges, and if you can pull those off, they won't burn any stamina. Plus, they have invincibility frames, so practicing your dodging is definitely worth your time. There's a bunch more combat tricks and a lot more depth to the whole combat system, and we'll get into all that in a dedicated video, which I'll link right here as soon as it's ready. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.